Today we'll be talking about whether neutral journalism is a good thing in the media. Neutrality is often confused with objectivity, but they're not the same thing. Neutrality is defined as the absence of decided views, expressions, or strong feelings. So commonly this would be 50-50 reporting. For example, if CNN is hosting a debate and they have a Republican and Democrat and then a moderator, that moderator would be a neutral party. However, objectivity would allow the host to take an opinion as long as it's guided by the facts. Objectivity is defined as expressing facts or conditions as perceived without distortion by personal feelings, prejudices, or interpretations. So someone who's objective can take a stance, but that stance must be reached by the truth. This is important for a number of reasons. The main reason is because journalism is built on trust, and a perceived bias can cause the news source lose credibility. An example would be Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC have a perceived partisanship, so their trust amongst some viewers is a little shaky. And overall, the public has leaned towards neutrality, it seems, and they don't want partisanship. If you look at a recent Pew Research poll done in January, 75% of global viewers said that it's never acceptable for their news source to be partisan, while 20% said it was sometimes acceptable. And although globally people seem happy with their media's neutrality and objectivity, just 40% of Americans believe that their news source portrays opposing political views fairly. This is also important because journalism's job is to educate the public, and a well-educated society benefits us all. And the way that we present the news can sometimes have consequences. If someone spreads misinformation, then it could put people at self-harm or could risk others. For example, when you look at anti-vaxxers, if you portray the anti-vaccination debate as neutral, it could give more credibility to the anti-vaxxers who aren't necessarily backed by science. And because of this, it could put the viewer or people around them at harm. So while it's irresponsible to be biased, it can also be a little harmful to be too neutral at times. Another interesting case study is climate change. The way that climate change has been reported and discussed in the media is somewhat controversial. Even though the majority of the scientific community agrees that climate change is real, the media does its best to provide neutral coverage, which presents the issue as 50-50. Some believe that the issue deserves to be debated, while others believe that neutral coverage is irresponsible. An example from a while ago that was quite popular was Bill Nye debated Marsha Blackburn, a Tennessee Republican, on climate change, and people were upset with how that debate was framed and that they had a scientist debate a Republican. So supporters of neutral coverage would say this. They'd agree with this idea of fair and balanced journalism and how news reporting should always be 50-50 and includes both sides. So a quote from Robert Entman that kind of shares this sentiment is, quote, "The balance aims for neutrality. It requires the reporter to present views of legitimate spokespersons of the conflicting sides in any significant dispute and provides both sides with roughly equal attention." People would also say that the media should be a marketplace of ideas. They should present every idea and let the people decide what they want. And journalism should stay out of these type of debates because journalists have their perceived bias. So what neutrality does is it eliminates the journalist's voice and ability to spread his biases, which some people would prefer. And people also like this because it allows minority opinions to be spread. Now, whether that's anti-vaxxers or just third-party political opinions, they just prefer that some marketplace exists for those ideas, and it's not always two-sided. So the problem with neutral reporting, or the problem that people have with it, is that it gives the illusion of a debate when there's not necessarily a debate. So FAIR.org did some interesting research about climate change, and from the articles they examined, they found that just over 50% were portraying climate change as a hotly debated, or as they say, a rip-roaring debate within the scientific community, which it really wasn't. So some of these articles are framing the issue of climate change as 50-50, when in reality it might be closer to 90-10 or 95-5. Another issue that people take with neutral reporting is this idea of a qualified source. if you're going to have neutral reporting, it needs to be two qualified sources discussing an issue. If you look at the Bill Nye the Science Guy and Marsha Blackburn example, these people aren't on equal footing. You have someone who literally has science in his name debating a Republican about science. It just gives the viewer the illusion that both sides are equally as credible when that's clearly not the case. So my opinion is I always would lean towards objectivity over neutrality. I think neutrality can be harmful because it can balance opinions that shouldn't really be balanced. If the facts are leading you to 90-10 in another side's favor, then you shouldn't frame the debate as 50-50. And even if people accuse you of being partisan, you should take a side if you truly believe that the facts lead you to that side. Another thing I think is important is just be objective. As I said, don't be afraid to be partisan and go where the facts lead you. Objectivity often includes being partisan. If one side's factually correct, then the side's factually correct. I don't really like this idea that you have to present the illusion of a debate in order to keep both sides happy. I think it's journalists' responsibility to find the truth, no matter where the truth leads you. Another thing I believe is don't platform spokespeople who are unqualified to give their opinion. In the Bill Nye versus Marsha Blackburn example, you shouldn't have a scientist debating a Republican from Tennessee about science. It's just not equal, and it's pointless. And overall, my main statement about this issue is that objectivity leads to more accuracy, while all neutrality does is leave people skeptical and unsure of the truth. And here are the references that I used for my article. Feel free to search them out and research them.